Welcome back to the Voice of the Valley. Today we are here with Leah Quirk. She is an Ayurveda practitioner and she is the founder of Soul Natural Health. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So, what is exactly an Ayurveda practitioner?
So, Ayurveda is the oldest health and healing system originating from India. So, that's what I'm certified in. I also teach at the Northampton Community College. So, if anybody's interested in learning about Ayurveda, but it's a really good basis and foundation to health. It kind of uses all like a manifestation. And so, when you understand yourself that way, it's basically we're all a living ratio or math equation. I see it of like elements and qualities. And when things get out of balance, that's when we start having problems. But we basically use the concept of polarity to bring balance back into our lives. So if you have so much heating in the body, we would use cooling herbs. If you have too much dryness, moisture. So, I mean, that's basically the basis of Ayurveda, but that's not particularly, what I'm about. So I work with all types of health issues, but I specialize in parasites and I focus a lot on digestion and elimination because in Ayurveda, we say that the root cause of all disease is ama, and that's undigested food that sits and rots inside of us.
So, undigested food. Is this where the parasites are finding their homes?
Yeah, well, the reason that parasites are such a big issue today is because people are not digesting and eliminating right. We're eating a lot of processed foods. We have low stomach acidity because normally parasites wouldn't really survive in our bodies. They would be killed by our stomach acidity. This is a thing too where it's like we shouldn't be so obsessed with being alkaline because there's parts of your body where you don't want to be completely alkaline. But this is why we have, them at such prevalent rates today. And it's so common. Also, international travel. That wasn't a thing in the past or that people could do. And a lot of our food is imported too, because parasites, people tend to think of it as, a third world country problem. But it's really like an everybody problem today. But most of our food is imported and they use human feces as a cheap fertilizer in other countries. And a big way that we get them is also through our produce.
So what are some of the negative things parasites do within the human body?
Well, I think with parasites, it's kind of like the zombie apocalypse, right? It's like, a lot of people are already acting like the living dead. They're walking around, they have food rotted, they're rotting inside. They're rotting inside, they're not digesting and eliminating well. And they're creating basically this ecosystem for microorganisms like this to thrive in their body. And then a lot of people end up actually living for the parasite and the parasite's needs. So it's why so many people they can't give up food that's not good for
What do you
them.
mean by they end up living for the parasite?
Well, you're technically like 1% human. Like you're largely outnumbered by like other microorganisms, where that's bacteria, protozoa, parasites, and fungi. So you're not always like technically running the show. So a lot of the choices you make, down to like the food you eat, even like the people you F, really stems down to a lot of these other microorganisms in your body.
Incredible. So, how do you help people get rid of these parasites?
So, it's not, I would say it's not as simple for some. Like I've been dealing with parasites probably since, I was a child. I've only learned this piece of the puzzle about 5 years ago, and I'm still routinely passing worms. So for people that had really chronic health issues that have been outstanding for a very long time, it requires a lot of dedication because let's say like one roundworm can lay 200,000 eggs a day. That's like a really big problem. Times that by how many you've had, how long you've had them. And then they'll produce like biofilms in the body, they'll insist in organs in the body. So they're not always that easy to get to. So it really requires a lot of dedication and you have to constantly cycle treatment. And for some that may, not be as intense as for other people, but the biggest thing is when I work with people is that we get you digesting and eliminating right first. So I work on that before we move into doing a parasite cleanse because you have to be able to effectively pass them because when they die, they also release toxins. And so if your detox pathways aren't clear and you're not eliminating right, you're going to reabsorb those toxins. And that's why people have such a strong like Herxmeyer reaction. So it's really important we work at layers. We're removing foods that fuel parasite activity, like with sugar or like simple carbs. So there's like a lot of layers to it, and that's kind of how I work with people. People often, they just want to cleanse. And I kind of laugh. I'm like, I've been cleansing my intestines out for like 10 years. You know what I mean? I'm like, you have to think how long you've curated these issues, like your entire life of, not eating right or taking care of yourself. Like that's not going to heal itself in, a few days with an herb. Because people, when they go to the holistic side, they still have that Western, mindset of like, I want the herb to cure all or like that magic pill. And it doesn't work that way. There's a right way and a wrong way to do things. So, holistically, we want to work, on the body as a whole, and put that whole picture together.
So, what are some simple carbs that the parasites feed on?
Well, I mean, for a lot of people, gluten in bread is like a big issue because, I mean, it turns to sugar in the body. Bread also has so many different proteins in it. So, for people that have food sensitivities and digestive issues, that's definitely something you want to eliminate for a while. But sugar is basically, it's like crack to parasites. You know what I mean? So basically, that's going to fuel their activity, their energy to reproduce more. So I know for myself, I used to like binge chocolate till I would basically want to throw up. And I felt like I had no control over it. And again, because that wasn't really me making that choice. And that's what's hard for people with giving up foods. But you have to come to a awareness that it's not you that's craving these foods. It's the parasites that are craving these foods.
So, what are the most common parasites in the US and worldwide?
Most common, especially with like children, would be like pinworms. Pinworms are very common. So they cause a lot of like itching in that area. They can cause colic in babies. Roundworms are very common. There's a lot of parasites you can get even from your pets. Toxoplasma gondii, that one causes like schizophrenia in people. It actually kind of like encourages people to become like addicts. It's pretty insane because it actually populates in the area of your brain where dopamine is produced. So you have an output of 3.5 times more dopamine. So you're more prone to reckless situations and behavior like sex addiction, drug addiction. So a lot of people that have struggled with these issues, again, it's like brings up the question of is it willpower alone or is something else, influencing a person's behavior? And they say 50% of us are carrying a latent infection of that. So people may have it dormant and it may or may not become active. So that you can get from cats, dogs, you can contract parasites. If you have a pet, and we have a lot of people whose pets have illness, they get cancer, they have cysts, they're also dealing with parasites. You have to regularly deworm your animals, especially if you're taking in a stray animal or you're adopting any type of animal. You need to deworm your pets because that's another transmission route for us. Hookworms you can get just in the grass, but a lot of stuff you get from your produce. And the biggest risks for people are also when it comes to like meats would be pigs and fish. And sushi is like very popular today. It
Mhm.
wasn't as popular before, but 1 square inch of raw sushi has like over 10,000 eggs in it. Like I would never eat sushi and you should never eat pork because pigs' bodies are just like ours. So we have similar digestive tracts. So what happens is, pigs, they live in their crap and they don't have pores, they don't detoxify or sweat out. So what goes into them stays in them and the parasites behave in our bodies the same way. And that can cause seizures. Like I used to have seizures all the time. And that was from the tapeworm that you can get from pork. So those ones are also very dangerous. There's others you can contract from
And
pork.
I want to add on pork
Yeah.
because humans and pork are very, very similar within their digestive system,
Yes.
like you said. So when a worm finds itself into a human, it is going to thrive
Yeah.
because they were doing very well in the pig. But the main difference between a human, so they say humans are the one of the most evolved species because of our pores, because we sweat, which can let us run for
Oh.
very, very, very long distances. We recover faster and all that, whereas pork doesn't.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting fact that, pork does not sweat at all. Humans sweat.
Yeah.
Yeah, look at the difference between humans.
So everything stays in them. Well, they say pigs are like, I think the second smartest animal. I never thought of our pores had that much significance. So that's interesting.
Mhm.
Well, the thing with cows, like cows have like four stomach
Mhm.
chambers. So parasites don't typically survive in cows. So they're actually
Yeah.
like the lowest risk.
Yeah.
You can get like a tapeworm from beef, that's common, but it doesn't pose a lot of risk to us.
How about chicken?
I haven't studied a lot into parasites in chicken. There's a lot of different type of bacteria
Hmm.
that's, pathogenic you can contract from chicken.
Then stay away from fish as much as you can, or cook it well,
Yeah.
and pork.
Pork, and then your produce. So a lot of them will insist in your produce. I was taught by my first mentor and Ayurvedic practitioner that like if you buy like a head of cauliflower or broccoli, because it has all those crevices, you dump it in boiling water first and you'll see larvae come out. It's absolutely disgusting. And so I was like taught that you always do that before you use it. But a lot of stuff insists in our produce. So I soak it with baking soda and hydrogen peroxide, and you'll be surprised at like what you find left in the bowl. But there's ones you can even get from water, like you shouldn't drink tap water. You can contract like giardia that causes like a lot of diarrhea issues in people. And a lot of people with these issues, they're not receiving the right help. You know what I mean? Because people don't often know what they're treating.
Hmm.
So I'm going to go back to when you were talking about the animals, dogs. So do you think the reason dogs get dewormed is so they don't pass it to their owner?
Yeah, I mean, it's very common for, animal. I mean, that's the funny thing about it. It's like so common for animals we know to deworm them, but we don't think about that with ourselves. Yeah, that's like a common practice in other countries that they regularly deworm. My friend in Costa Rica, when her daughter went to school, they gave them a dewormer, you know? But yeah, that's typically why. I mean, just, for health reasons, but we should always deworm them. Like you should at least deworm your animal, I would say like every 6 months. When you have like a puppy or, a kitten, you should actually like every few weeks for the first 6 months.
Oh, wow. Do you
Yeah.
think there's a lot of parasites getting spread through daycares and kids?
Yeah, well, that's the thing with pinworms. Like pinworms is very common in settings like that because people are, they're opening so many diapers, and you can get like a cyst that, because they have a cyst stage and then they have like an active stage, but that can like just be under somebody's fingernail, and it can, lay low like that and still be able to infect somebody for several weeks. And so you have, people changing diapers from one kid to another. And so that's, where kids often contract these issues.
And you also said traveling, right?
Yeah, traveling. Well, that's too like why we have things more prevalent today, and also food being shipped in. Things like sushi are becoming more popular.
Do you think there's any destinations that carry more parasites than others, or?
I would say like Asia, certain parts of Asia, where, flukes are very, very common because of, well, flukes are usually in like crustaceans. Sometimes they can also get in fish too, but a lot of different like types of seafood. The flukes are like very dangerous. They're like leaf-shaped flatworms, but that's like very common in Asia for people to have issues mainly related to their liver with flukes because they'll go right to the liver.
Wow.
And so, people get, or also like they go to the bile ducts. That's a big thing here. Like a lot of people get gallbladder issues. If you have gallbladder issues, you have parasites because what they do is they like to suck on the bile ducts. And so they block that flow. So they block it from functioning. People start getting gallstones. But gallbladder issues are primarily related to parasites. And people get that removed and then, they're never going to be able to fully digest food. You know what I mean? Then they have a lifetime of issues. And then we're not treating again, why was this not functioning? We just tend to cut things out, remove it, and think, we're solving the problem.
Instead of finding the issue, the root
Yeah.
cause. So you said seafood. Is that just raw seafood, or they could be in cooked seafood as well?
Well, you're gonna have more contamination risk when you're eating stuff raw. They say it's better if you freeze stuff. So if you freeze it for like several days before cooking it, that's like a better precaution that you can do.
And
What
that was for flukes, correct?
Yeah, well, fluke, there's all different things you can get from seafood. You can get roundworms, you can get the fish tapeworm. There's a tapeworm that you can contract from fish, and it'll rob your entire body of B vitamins.
What about shellfish? This is super interesting. Shellfish. How
I
about
don't
that?
know a lot about.
Crustaceans, like you said.
Yeah, well, crustaceans, certain ones can get flukes. The thing with crustaceans is they're like the vacuum cleaners of the ocean, right? Like they feed off like bacteria and dead animals, basically. You know what I mean? Like it's not a luxury to eat a lobster. You know,
Why do people
it's
think
not
it's
a
a
clean
luxury?
species. It's just expensive. It's just something fancy people do, you know?
Yeah, it costs a lot of
I
money.
don't eat seafood. I never like seafood.
It costs a lot of money to catch them. I'm guessing.
I don't
So,
know. Well, people eat fish eggs. Like people eat caviar,
caviar,
and
yeah.
that's
They pay a lot
considered
for it as well.
yeah, expensive and fancy, and that's disgusting to me. Yeah.
So sticking with water, are there a lot of bodies of water like lakes and swimming pools where you could get a lot of parasites from?
I mean, you can contract a lot of things that way or pathogenic bacteria. I mean, even like there's protozoa parasites, so they're like microscopic, like Giardia. And there's a couple others that you can get even like in swimming pools or tap water because they're actually resistant to chlorine. And that's like a big issue worldwide, is, people that get waterborne diarrhea illness, and that usually tends to be from Giardia. And there's another one I can't think of right now, but that's the thing. They're resistant to chlorine. So you can even contract them in a swimming pool or in a river, mountain stream. That's the thing. People that have well water too, you still want to be mindful and maybe still try to filter it some way, because you can still contract things from that water.
So like for hygiene, we know, wash your hands, change your clothes, take a shower, use deodorant, all this stuff, right? But what about for parasites? How do you like de-parasite?
I'm probably the worst person to talk about hygiene.
Yeah.
Because I think you have a microbiome on your skin and body. I don't think we should be showering that much or washing our hands. But what do you about like,
So
treating
like
and
so how do
preventative
you
care?
de-parasite? Like they say, okay,
Yeah.
wash your hands to get rid of bacteria.
Well, that's very good for like preventing the spread of a lot of protozoa or like chlorella, which you can contract from like that gets into like maybe basil or herbs or stuff like that. And then, there's countries that have major outbreaks of chlorella that could have been limited by just people having soap, but they don't have that. You know what I mean? Some countries, they don't have that stuff available. The biggest thing is, again, we're working with herbs. Like there's a lot of herbs. So I make a formula that like anybody can purchase, and I mainly use Ayurvedic herbs. You usually see people use black walnut and wormwood. That's like primary Western treatment. The thing that you have to be mindful, like people just think all herbs are safe because they're natural, but that's not really true. Like black walnut and wormwood can be very toxic to humans. So you can only use them in small doses for a short amount of time. So my formula is a lot more safe with the herbs I use. So just something, to be mindful of. But again, you have to work on digesting, elimination. The big thing, a big cornerstone in my practice is enemas. So what you do is you would take these herbs and you make like an herbal tea. And you do that as an enema because this way you're getting the herbs directly into the colon to be absorbed through the intestinal wall and you're binding them out because that is like the hardest part of with parasites is getting them out of the body.
Mhm.
People will have them, they could treat them, but they may never ever see them.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And people are just they're full of shit. I don't know how else to put it. You'd be surprised how much old fecal matter is inside of you.
So let's go to your products real quick. So we have right here out of sight parasites. What does this do exactly?
That's my Parasite herbal formula. So that's like safe for anybody. Anybody can purchase that on my website, soulnaturalhealth.com. And I have one for Candida.
Yep.
And then I also do there's a Pitta Digest. That's kind of like a laxative, but it more works with getting the liver to function better.
Mhm.
And I am working on a biofilm formula. And I'll have the herbal enema one available, but I do custom formulas for clients.
Mhm.
So that's something that you have access to when working with me. So I'll spend like up to 2 hours with you on initial consult. So it's very in depth, it's very thorough. And then we may do custom formulas for you. And I'm also doing a book, and it'll be the most comprehensive book out there on parasites and treatment. So it includes like the different types with their life cycle, associated symptoms and diseases. It'll be about how to treat them. It'll have just about like every way imaginable in there. And then I'm going to have like about diet in there, energy practices, detoxification therapies. So I've read all of them and it's a lot of repeated information and it's, they're not as in depth as mine would be. So I think it'll definitely be like the most comprehensive book out there on the subject. So I've dedicated really like the last 5 years to really studying this and experimenting with myself as somebody who has really severely battled this stuff and also just understanding them as a species.
So these are the products then that you offer. If they want to purchase some of these products, they should first do a consultation with you. You recommend?
No, they can go to my website, soulnaturalhealth.com, but I always recommend people do a consultation. As I say, there's a right way and a wrong way to do things, and people, they often just want to buy something and expect results. But if we're not working on all the pieces of the puzzle, it's not going to be as effective, and I always stress that to people.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, hold on real quick. Ramses, we'll edit this out, but can you move the camera so that cord isn't in the video? That shouldn't be in the video.
We should talk about cancer too.
We will.
Cancer?
I feel like my bangs have looked terrible too. I keep
Okay.
I know when you did that. I was like, are we ending?
No.
I kept looking at my bangs.
I just thought
My
it was a
bangs
good
have been
time.
driving me crazy. I keep looking over here. I'm like, oh my God, they look so bad. I should have cut them shorter, but then they would be all crooked. I know it.
Sorry, but I have a question.
No, I
too to
feel like
open
it's
up with.
so on my face too. I wish
So
it was
we were
like
going to go
back
into
further,
cancer
but-
then.
Well, I want to.
Yeah.
Well, I want to get
No, you
into
go first,
some
yeah.
of the.
Oh, and then we want to talk about them as demons.
For sure, I got
Yeah,
you.
but there's
Yeah.
still a
Oh, I'll
lot.
go-
There's still a
Those two
lot. There's
things.
still a lot to
Joe,
talk about.
whenever you're
That's
ready
one.
to go to the moon, this is all you got to do
Okay.
on your head.
I got you.
now moon time. Because we're going to go to the moon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do it right
Okay.
now.
Can I see myself again real quick? Sorry. The whole time I was like, my bangs look so bad. Okay.
No, they're good.
Look
They
fire.
were, before they were like really bad. I was like, kept being like, ugh. This is why I hate this stuff.
Nah, you look good. All right, 5. So let's get into some of the symptoms that the parasites cause. Can you name a couple of the symptoms?
Yeah, so for a lot of people, they're going to have a lot of bloating, digestive issues because as they even digest your food, they're going to produce also like toxic compounds. But the biggest thing you're going to see is a lot of vitamin and mineral deficiencies. Also, people who are anemic. Anemic is a big sign of parasites as well. And people who have a high, so it's like and sinful. I cannot say it, but a lot of white blood cells. So, but because then your body is really trying to fight an infection, right? It's like we're often led to believe, even with like autoimmune disease, your body's attacking itself, but that's like total bullshit. Like your body is trying to attack something. They're just very clever at hiding, or they'll cover themselves in heavy metals, your own peptides, how to disguise themselves in your body. For some people too, if they have like mental health issues, like toxoplasma gondii, however, that's connected to like schizophrenia. People are bipolar, OCD, struggle with addiction, and really like all mental health is gut health. So everything going on in your gut is going to be registering in your brain. So if you have anxiety, you have ADHD, like all these things should be treated as gut health issues.
So you mentioned the parasites feed on the nutrition,
Yes.
the nutrients. Do you suggest people getting like a blood work done before they come see you for a consultation?
I don't really suggest that. So like in Ayurveda, you can. I mean, that's great if you do. If you have means to do that, that's great. Because that's very important stuff to look at. That's just not, what I do as an Ayurvedic practitioner. So I'm not studied or trained to read that. But what we do in Ayurveda, which is like very unique, is we look at people's like face lines and their tongue and their nails to diagnose. And so if you have like deep grooves here, like that means like malabsorption. If you get little white spots in the corner of your lip, like I'll still see myself, I'll get flared up sometimes. That's a roundworm infection. If you have like lines on your nails, that's malabsorption. When we look at your tongue, if you have a coating, that means you have undigested food in your GI tract. So that's what's really cool about Ayurveda is like everything is a manifestation, like every crease, everything on your body. So that's really what we look to, and we talk a lot about like, what are your bowel movements like? I think for myself, like all the health issues I had my whole life, nobody asked me how I was going to the bathroom every day, or I had like chronic constipation. It's like, no wonder I was like so mentally like not okay, but we don't even ask that stuff, So that's really like what I look at, when I'm working with people. And I want to remind people too that, a diagnosis is just a name for group symptoms. It doesn't mean anything. And people attach that and then it becomes their identity. And people are always searching for that as the answer, but it's not the answer. It's often the question. Like you didn't just catch this diagnosis. It manifested over time throughout your life through, how you digest, your choices, your lifestyle. And a diagnosis doesn't explain that. And it doesn't explain how to heal an issue. It just says what medication to prescribe. So that's something people just want to start kind of like pulling away from is, the labels and diagnosis.
Do you have anybody that you've helped that went to a traditional doctor and then they've came to you and they ended up having parasites and you help them?
Yeah, I've had a lot of people I've worked with. I always say I'm like the last resort. I wish I wasn't the last resort. I tell people like start now. Many people make a lot of excuses and are just, I can feel it, like terrified to have to like confront themselves and work on their health. It's sad because it's like you want to see people wanting to feel good, willing to do this work. It's more of a chore to be ill than it is to take care of yourself. And it's an act of self-care and love. That's really what it is when you're making these choices. But I've had a lot of people come to me and it's like, when you get older, it's a lot harder, and the best we could do sometimes is make people comfortable or people can't even handle the detoxification aspect. But I've had people come to me with cancer, people who've had Crohn's, IBS, or a lot of serious digestive issues, who have used my formulas and have definitely found out they passed a lot of parasites. The problem is I've had clients that they do it once and they don't stay consistent, right? And then later down the road, I just had a client who ended up, getting her gallbladder removed. And it's like, I wish I stuck, with doing the parasite protocol, and it does, it requires a lot of dedication. You have to think how many years it took to create these issues. I know for myself, it might be a lifetime, you know what I mean, of healing. And that's, where people struggle. But I've definitely worked with a lot of people where, parasites was really what was going on. Yeah.
So you think it can cause long-term gut issues?
Yeah, it's definitely can. I mean, and you can have really bad cases. I have actually my sister-in-law, she had a perforated hole and had to get actually her intestine cut out. And it's like, well, what does that? Do you know what I mean? And if you have things that get that intense, you can have stuff like that happen, or damage to your liver, your gallbladder. Diabetes can also be related to parasites because they can insist on all these organs. I honestly think, with women that have a lot of like fibroids and cysts along the uterine lining, you have to think that's right behind the intestinal tract, that wall. So they can burrow into there, they can lay low in these cysts for like years even. So I think that's, even related. Cysts are really related to parasites. We relate that to cancer. But a lot of that really stems down to parasites. There's a lot of parallels between cancer and parasites.
And can you dive deep into that and kind of explain?
Yeah, so I feel like today it's like norm to get like cysts removed. I had one surgically removed from my breast once, and I used to have a lot of fibroids in my breast, and I had a lot of lung issues. Nothing was ever correlated there, And this is what they do is, they'll insist in the tissue. So they have their active kind of form and then they have a cyst form. And so they basically create like, it's a hard encasement that protects them and shields them from the body and your immune system. So they can lay low like that for quite a while. And this is the thing, when we're looking for cancer, we're often looking for cysts. We're looking for a polyp or some type of lesion. We're like, there's a lot of things about cancer today that just don't make sense. I mean, if you like, even with testing, I mean, I don't suggest people get screening done. I think unless you have an actual issue, because you might be one of those people that's told that, and then you're put through all these harmful treatments. And the thing is, we're not proven that cancer is actually like pre-screening is saving lives. The fatalities remain the same, but more people are diagnosed. If you zoom in that close on anybody, you're going to find an abnormality. You could say we all have cancer to some degree,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you do a biopsy or a mammogram, you can rupture these cysts, in a mammogram. You're putting like almost 50 pounds on your breast. And then doing a biopsy, you're cutting into it, you can have a spill. So you can spill. And that's the thing. It's like, what is in it? Are we taking these cysts out and are we cutting them open and putting them under a microscope and be like, what is inside of this? Because protozoa can be completely microscopic, but a lot of the times, if you look up the definition of a cyst, it could be like an infection. It could be filled with like pus, but as some foreign material, or a lot of times it can be parasites. And so, the way we also test for cancer is you're putting people, you do a PET scan. And so you inject people with a radioactive glucose, and then you see if the cancer cells move to it. So it like lights up on a screen. Are you seeing cancer cells move towards sugar, or are you seeing parasites move towards sugar? You know what I mean? So it's like basically the same thing. And so imagine if, in a world where instead of, and I think there's so much fear around that word cancer, but if we took it as a word of caution, and that, time to start taking care of your health, time to get your ass in gear, right? And work on your diet, digestion, and doing a deworming protocol, before we do these harmful treatments, because a lot of these treatments, are basically destroying people's bodies.
Have you ever heard of a case where someone had cancer and they took a dewormer and it helped them?
Yeah, I have one client, and he has, I'm trying to think what type of cancer. I can't think of it. I think he has leukemia. But yeah, and he definitely has parasites. But he was diagnosed with cancer, and I've been working with him a while. And that's the thing; he's very old. He's a veteran, so you think he's traveled a lot in different things. He's also had struggles with addiction in the past. So but it's and when people get older, it's very difficult to work through a lot of these things because their body cannot handle as much. And that's why it's like you really need to start now, you know.
In private, we spoke about how parasites are almost like demonic possessions, right? And
Yeah.
how they will infiltrate your body, make you go towards certain cravings and stuff like that. So, what part? How much true do you think that is?
Yeah, like 1,000%. I was a crazy bitch with parasites. But yeah, no, well, that's what I was saying with Toxoplasma gondii. Well, you have to think it's like Um, okay, so I always think it's like raises the question, why do people do bad things? Right? I feel like we're always trying to understand that. Like, why do people, we can't wrap our minds around it sometimes. Like people that commit murder, commit rape, or just do like really horrible things, right? And a lot of those people, I really do believe that they're under some type of parasitic mind control. You know what I mean? And that's the thing with like Toxoplasma gondii. Like it's definitely linked to schizophrenia, severe mental health issues, and it will have people to be more reckless. That's why a lot of people get crazy around the full moon, because parasites tend to reproduce and are more active around the full moon. Like I had my whole reproductive system surgically removed because I would lose it during full moons. But I thought it was more connected to my period. And it turns out, yeah, that I was living with a lot of different types of parasites. But I do think like a lot of people, and you look at people, especially people in active addiction, people on the street, obviously they're not healthy. Obviously they have the type of body that's creating an environment to harbor these entities because they're entities, right? I feel like myself through my own deworming process, like every time I pass stuff, it like brings up trauma. It's almost like a vessel for every negative emotion or experience I ever had. And yeah, so I'm trying to think what else I wanted to say about this. But I think a lot of people's behavior, emotions, and all these things are being influenced by these microorganisms in their body.
So, what about they call people sometimes you're a parasite, X, Y, and Z. So, a parasite is basically an entity that feeds off a host, correct?
Yeah, and it only lives for itself.
Only live for-
There's a quote in the beginning of the Alien movie, and it describes a parasite like so perfectly well. It's like such a, oh my god, I wish I could find it. It's just it only lives for its needs. It doesn't care about anything else. You know what I mean? In its path or way. It's honestly a very well. It would be an excellent weapon. You know, whether that's something we're all being poisoned with or not. It's a very good weapon in this world because people often don't know what's going on. You know what I mean? But people who live that way, I mean, they're only living. When people say that, it means they're only living for their needs and nothing else. You know.
Have you ever helped someone with their mental health by treating them the Toxoplasma gondii?
I can't say that specifically, but I have worked a lot with people's mental health regarding their, working with their gut health. Because again, all mental health is connected there. Your intestinal tract is aligned with a sheath of neurons that connects to your vagus nerve at the bottom of your brain. So you have signals always going both ways. But a lot of people, all their mental health issues are really gut health issues. And a lot of that stems down to from the microbiome. Pretty much all disease is rooted in leaky gut syndrome, gut dysbiosis, a poor microbiome. And if there's like really chronic health issues going on, there's most likely a case of parasites. But everything really starts there. And because we've been taking so many antibiotics, also like steroids, immunosuppressants, that's another reason why parasites are more prevalent in us. These drugs didn't exist before. We're shutting down our immune system and we're wiping out all our beneficial bacteria. But that bacteria produces neurotransmitters. Like serotonin's made in your gut, pretty much 80% of it, I think 90%. Also produces GABA to help kind of keep you calm. So a lot of the chemicals that your brain needs are produced by bacteria in your gut.
Is that why sugar is very bad for your gut as well? Because it gives you that dopamine rush or the serotonin hit when you eat it, and then when you don't get enough, it's kind of like you're withdrawing.
Yeah, well, the compound sugar is very closely related to cocaine. I think it's actually more addictive than cocaine, but they're very related. But the sugar feeds that bad bacteria. That's more so why we crave it. And then that bacteria wants more.
So are there any supplements that kind of help with the gut bacteria, or like probiotics?
Yeah, so probiotics, there's one brand I use that it's called Terraganics that I really recommend to my clients because you can waste a lot of money on shelf ones and they may not survive their way to your stomach. They may not be totally shelf stable. So the one I use is actually a liquid formula. But then you also, you want prebiotics, the food that feeds the probiotics, that you keep it alive that way. One of the best efficient ways is getting back to enemas is doing a probiotic enema. You can do probiotic enemas because it doesn't always survive its way to your gut, right? So that's like the best way to repopulate and cure IBS because irritable bowel syndrome is not having that bacteria. So when the food makes its way through your large colon, like or your large intestine, your colon, that's where that bacteria would break that food down. Like we can't digest fiber. Like we can't. We can't digest vegetables or fiber without bacteria. Like we don't as a species. It's the bacteria that does that. But it's what they produce when they do that's so important for us. That's why people are so sensitive to foods today. And then they have leaky gut and then natural toxins in food leak through the gut lining. But yeah, so probiotics are most important. So, I mean, there's so many things that probiotics can help cure. I mean, even people with autism is highly linked to Clostridium difficile bacteria, a lot of pathogenic bacteria in people, especially because more children are being born through C-section. So when children are born through C-section, they don't inherit their mother's microbes through the vaginal canal. And then especially if they're not breastfed, they're immediately placed on antibiotics and all this stuff. So they don't have any healthy bacteria. And that's why, you have high rates of autism and all these things today. So we really have to work more with bacteria. We're always trying to kill everything. We have to like get away from like the germ theory or that we have to destroy everything with chemicals or in our body. We need bacteria. We have to start supporting that more.
So is there a correct way to test for parasites? Is it stool, blood?
There are stool tests available. Diagnostics does stool tests. I never tried it. I would suggest because, there are really great pharmaceuticals that really do help in treating parasites. Again, you still have to work with diet and digestion because when people take these drugs and if they're not able to pass these things, they end up creating more toxins in their body. But they're very efficient. And for some people, they work better than herbs. Some people can handle them better than herbs. So, I mean, if you're trying to get like a doctor on board, I would suggest like taking the herbs for parasites and getting yourself to be able to pass them and then doing a stool test because, that's the problem for a lot of people is proving this stuff to their doctors that often write a lot of this off. So, that would kind of, I would think, be the best way to go about it because you're not always going to see them in your stool. I never saw a parasite and I was probably living with them since I was like 12 years old, and they can be encysted in your organs. They're not always just linked to your digestive tract. So that's why it's so hard to identify and find them. So I would work by trying to treat it even naturally and be able to bind them out of the body that, you can prove it through a test.
I don't know if I heard this from you, but Uh, isn't aren't parasites linked also with like a heavy metal?
Yeah.
Heavy
So if
metals?
you have parasites, you have heavy metals. You have a lot of heavy metals, you have parasites. They go hand in hand. So they like to use the heavy metals to coat themselves. They'll use that to protect themselves, like as a shield. They'll also create biofilms. So they'll kind of secrete this mucus and they'll take other undigested fibers in your body, heavy metals. They'll combine with other pathogenic bacteria like candida, and they'll form these like structures, along the lining in your intestines, and they'll kind of hide behind that stuff. So some people, when they do a parasite cleanse, they'll pass like clumps of this material, and a lot of that is biofilms. So that's something I'm working on too, is making like a biofilm formula, and also binders. Binders are helpful too to absorb the toxins so they don't get reabsorbed into your bloodstream, like taking charcoal in the evening.
How do you gain these metals? How are people filled with metals and stuff like that?
Chemtrails. Being sprayed in our sky. There's metals in our sky. There's heavy metals in our water. We live in the Lehigh Valley. This is the home of Bethlehem steel. Do you ever go down to the river and look at the rocks? Like you can tell that, the heavy metals have even changed the color in them.
So what can we do, let's just say, to have less metals in our body?
The best thing for metals is like spirulina, what is that? Chlorophyll. Those are really good. Cilantro. The best is like you can make a smoothie. Like I really suggest this, but again, this is more work to people. But you would take like a cup of fresh cilantro and blend it with blueberries, and drink that every day for 2 weeks, and that works very, very well. And then add in like some spirulina to it.
And then before you do that, you have to have baking soda. You have to put into the baking
Yeah.
soda there.
Yeah, clean the cilantro, soak the cilantro. Yeah, you should soak everything. It's like we just take stuff, cut it up raw, and eat it. You know
See,
what I mean?
I'm a more like a blue pill type guy, I don't want to see worms floating. And I saw, Leah did a couple of experiments and stuff she showed on her Instagram. You literally have the larva and the worms floating to the top of the
Oh, you
bowl.
saw, yeah.
Yeah.
That was like cleaning some grapes, I think. Yeah. Yeah, you'll see a lot of that stuff in there. I mean, it's a lot of people think that of extra work, but I mean, to me, it feels good to take the time to put that energy when I'm making a meal or something for myself.
Yeah.
Do you know? You don't want to go about it like with fear based over everything. Do you know? The ultimate goal really with parasites is like you may not totally eradicate everything, but you create your body to be a place and environment that stuff like this doesn't want to stay in and thrive
It's
in.
sad because I feel like most people, they want to give up. They're like, oh, well, everything's unhealthy, so might as well just be unhealthy.
Yeah, but they don't care then. You know what I mean? And you can't change people's minds who don't care. And that's like I was saying, some of the people that come to me, it's by the time they're on the bed for surgery. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, why did you let this go so long? A lot of it is ego. A lot of it is ego. People are like terrified to have to like face themselves. And it's like, dude, we all aren't here to be, perfect right away. We're all like, I try to like remind people like I was bedridden for years. I had seizures every day. I couldn't digest anything. I thought I was going to be like the boy in the bubble, like it was insane, but it's like I wanted so bad to feel better. It's like, here's your life. Here's a precious gift. You know what I mean? What do you want to do with it? And a lot of people, they just settle, you know what I mean? And they're just going to eat crap, and they're used to that. That's what they're complacent in. People are used to being bloated every day when it's like, it's such a warning sign. Like it's so difficult even to get clients. I'm constantly faced with that. I'm constantly faced with like people's excuses, or people will even say it's money. Well, their doctors pay the copays, but it's like, how often are you going to that doctor? How many medications do you have to refill? Do you know what I mean? Like it never ends. And it's like you have it, but you put it in the wrong place. Your Starbucks every day, you go out drinking, you know what I mean? So, when people even answer, oh, it's expensive, it's like that just kind of shows mentally where you're at. I would be like, well, what can I do? Do you know what I mean? Like there's people I've offered to work with for free, and I'll be like, all you have to do is ask me. And I will put that in their hands, and they still won't. It's sad. It's like I wish we saw more people that wanted to. Often people don't believe that's possible. They don't believe in more for themselves. Like everything stems down to your belief system. You know what I mean? And it's sad. Like I feel like that's the most frustrating thing with having a holistic business. There's so many people I want to help and see, and I could clearly like I'm like a psychic with this shit. Like I can put the puzzle together. You know what I mean? I'm like, this is what's going on. But you know, you can't convince somebody. You know what I mean?
A lot of people don't even want to find out if they have them or that they do have. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like that's
I
part of
think
it.
it's validating, man. When I
Mhm.
saw that come out of me, I was like, no wonder I'm fucking crazy. Like to me, it was like it was validating because people get caught up in like, especially like, being so emotional or and thinking, I was diagnosed bipolar when I was young, and that's like a horrible thing to live with because you're like, oh, I was born with like a chemical imbalance. So it makes you feel there's no hope. Do you
Mhm.
know what I mean? It makes you feel there's no purpose to your life, and I'm just gonna have to be on medication and I'm just crazy. It's like it's horrible, and not really understanding, yeah, that there's more to the picture. It's not just like you know what I mean, and that you're just crazy. There's other things again that are influencing your behavior and stuff.
So, are there any parasites that kind of mess with your hormones?
That's something because I had such severe hormonal issues, that I had my whole reproductive system removed. But that's something I haven't studied to directly link myself. I would say though, like your liver has to like process estrogen and stuff. And let's say if you have parasites, they can insist in your liver, that can maybe disrupt that process.
Mhm.
It's going to disrupt, a lot of the like kind of cellular communication in your body, do you know? Especially also if you're feeding a lot of sugar. Because they say that even like PCOS is really common in women today, and when they have high testosterone. And I was just studying that a lot of that is because too much insulin. People have really high insulin that it starts converting the estrogen to testosterone.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So, what are some common myths that you hear about parasites on the online?
That you get them from meat only, like cows, like vegan, like that vegans are like the best way to not get parasites because people will just it's simplistic thinking and I get it. It's also thinking like, well, fat makes you fat, but that's actually not even really true either. But people will think, oh, what lives in flesh only feeds off of flesh,
Mm.
and you have to remember these are species. Sometimes like when we get them from like animals, we're like accidental hosts. Do you know what I mean? And then there's some where like we are hosts for them. So they're gonna behave differently in other types of species. It's not as simplistic as what lives in flesh. And a lot of stuff you get. The main way is feces to mouth. So basically, contaminated soil with feces or stuff like that, or water. And again, a lot of our produce is grown with human feces in other countries, but so that's a big myth. I mean, and just thinking that it's a once and done thing, again, it's like if you do a parasite cleanse and you see them come out, understand you have to keep doing it. You have to keep doing it. So, I mean, you can do it maybe once a month and then spread it out every 3 months. The biggest thing is that you become consciously aware of yourself and your body. Like I'm consciously aware of when I'm having a flare up, because I'll migrate in your body when I have hatching or things are migrating that, I have to do some cleansing. But I actually pass stuff a lot now without having to do anything because I'm like, my body's becoming a place they don't want to stay in.
Because you keep doing all those cleanses and stuff like that.
Yeah, but like today, the way I eat, I heavily supported my microbiome. So it's like I'm not actively doing things to directly kill parasites anymore. I just tend to naturally pass stuff a lot, which is like huge. Like a lot of people just don't. You know what I mean? That's the biggest thing is being able to pass them. And that's where like the enemas are very effective. The only people who tend to really see them are like colonic practitioners. That's kind of like the only place they're really kind of seen and acknowledged in the medical industry.
So, can parasites tell whether it's processed sugar or real sugar?
I can't really answer that. I mean, so you have like fructose, you know what I mean? The difference between that. I mean, I think, even if you're eating fructose, I mean, that still can be a lot of sugar,
Mhm.
just being mindful, but I can't answer that.
Gotcha.
But
Let's
I would
talk.
think so.
Yeah.
I
Let's
would
talk
think
about.
so.
Let's talk about candida. I know you spoke on it briefly earlier. What is it, and how is it different from
So
parasites?
candida is a bacteria. The main way you're going to know if you have candida is if you look at your tongue and you have a thick white coating. If you have a thick white coating, that's a sign that you have candida in your gut. And that tends to feed off a lot of like grains, processed dairy, and sugar as well. And so people will have some like digestive issues with that. So And they also will crave a lot of those foods. I'm actually working that with my mom right now. My mom, she always loved ice cream. But she's always had a coating on her tongue like that. And so we just been working with that with probiotics. And I was telling her, you have to go very slow because she took a little too much the other day. Because when you're introducing bacteria, like the bad bacteria dies off, and then you're introducing new bacteria. So usually it's often worse before it gets better. When you start treating issues like this. Yeah.
Can like a beer contribute to candida?
Yeah, because beer is very fermented. It's yeasty, it's fermented, so anything yeasty.
And do you see a lot of weight gain in people with candida?
I would say so, yeah. I mean, you got to think about people today who have very large, wide stomachs. Like their intestines have to be very stretched out. It's like, what's in there? You know what I mean? Like there's got to be a lot living in there and going on. There's a whole little city in there. You know what I mean? Like, it's pretty crazy. Like I said, it always frustrates me when people hit me up just for a cleanse or a detox because I'm like, it just doesn't work that way. But it's like you will be blown away by how much old shit is in you, like at any given time. And people will be like, well, I go every day. And I'm like, I promise you, like it's not it's not enough. Yeah.
So what are some of the herbs you use to treat the candida?
So I still use like a lot of Ayurvedic herbs, so people won't really know them. Like musta, I think in American that's nutgrass is what I use. But there's also ashwan, there's ginger in there, so kind of like to help also digest. So the candida one's also really good for gas and bloating. I get a lot of good response from that one with people.
Do you have any other topics you wanted to go over besides candida and parasites?
I don't think so.
Are you sure?
I think I'm good. Do
Do you?
you?
Well, yeah. Well, before we wrap up, so what is your message to the world of those awakening, those that want to better their health?
Want it. Yeah.
Though, no, seriously, because there's been
Yeah.
a movement in 2010, 2015. No one cared about their health.
Yeah.
Everyone was going to McDonald's. Now, after COVID, everyone's sitting here and thinking, "Oh, we need to start working on our health." It's a trend going on.
I hope they are. I think they're still at McDonald's, but I don't know. I told the guy at the gym that this morning, don't eat that because he always has like McDonald's. And yeah, and I'm just like, so cringe.
Do you think there's tons of parasites
But
in McDonald's?
people are getting tired. People are getting tired with that the medical system isn't working for them anymore. And that's what happened with me. Some people, you have to exhaust everything till it's like there's nothing left. And sometimes you have people and they're so mad that the medicines and stuff aren't working, but they're also not willing to, they're not working on their health and they're eating crap every day. And yet they're so mad at the doctors. Like you have to take personal responsibility. And that's what Western medical system lacks. It's just, again, you have this diagnosis, you need to take this medicine. And the biggest thing is just telling people just start now. Like stop making excuses. Like there's nothing to be afraid of. Again, this is an act of self-care and love, and it's also building consciousness, right? Like spirituality really is consciousness, being consciously aware. Oh, when I eat this, I have bloating. This isn't good for me. Do you know? Like life is easy when it becomes black and white. Like something's good or it's bad for you. When you can navigate life that way, like you don't want to be the cause of your problems. And that was like my big awakening years ago was like, I don't want to cause my own problems anymore. And I'm so upset. And I'm in this victim mentality. And why me? Get like, I'm not doing anything actively to make my health better. And people get tired of that, And, we have to start taking personal responsibility. You have to act now. Because I know, like, for myself, I know what it's like to be bedridden. And, like, I don't want to be that way older. I don't want somebody wiping my ass older. I don't want to be going through it like that. And, like, you don't have to be. People want to YOLO, but it's like, when I was young, it was like, we're going to live fast and die young. And we're like these punk rockers. And we lived fast and we didn't die. And we ended up with a bunch of health issues. You know what I mean? Everything is karmic. Like, you can't escape karma. You can't escape law. Do you know what I mean? But there's nothing bad that can come from this,
Do you think one of the biggest myths people say is that you need to have a lot of money to eat healthy?
No, because I mean, I only eat really one meal a day. You know what I mean? I mean, it's like, how much do you need to eat? When you go to Whole Foods and you buy a bunch of processed food, that is, you know what I mean? Like, that's expensive. Do you know? So, I mean, it's really being mindful of like what you're buying. I mean, it's sad that we have things like McDonald's, but the truth is, it costs a lot of money to be sick.
Hmm.
That's something people have to be reminded of. It costs a lot of money being sick.
It's all about being boring too. You know what I mean? Because you could buy a big pack of chicken, a big pack of beef,
Yeah.
and you could cook that and eat that for the next couple of days.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But everyone, there's so much conveniency.
You have to cook.
Everyone
too.
wants something new every day. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? They want to switch their diet and
Yeah.
eat, you know what I mean, lobster one day, a cheeseburger the next day, and
Yeah.
so on. But if you just if you meal prep and stick to the same foods and be boring, then it's a lot cheaper than
Yeah.
actually eating out and eating unhealthy food.
Yeah. And there's a lot of resources in the valley. There are a lot of pantries and that farmers, my neighbor garden, she donates to it. I know that like the farmers market in the Easton Public Market, I believe that if you have like SNAP benefits, I believe it's doubled. And at the farmers market, if you buy
Oh, wow.
fresh produce, yeah. So I mean, there's resources and things. It's another excuse because it's like it may be, but it's like, but you'll figure it out. When you stop at the excuse instead of like, well, let me figure it out and try. Do you know what I mean? It's again, it gets down to your belief systems and how bad do you really want to feel better? Or are you just kind of looking for something just to, do you know what I mean? To pause you from taking that step further.
I agree.
Leah, it's been an excellent podcast. You really educated us today. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks,
But
Leah.
before we go, where can they find your products?
Yeah, so just go to soulnaturalhealth.com. So SOUL naturalhealth.com. And if you would like to work with me, I'm available for clients right now. I can work either online or in person. And like I said, the initial consult is an hour and a half. So it's very in depth and you'll get like an outline. So it'll be customized with diet, lifestyle, herbs, and we'll work in layers. I think people are always afraid, like we're going to change everything at once. It doesn't work that way. I know that. We got to do one small change at a time that you even become consciously aware that like, oh, like when I eat this way affects me. So some people I'm like, go 2 weeks and you don't eat this food, then you eat it again. Then you're like, oh my God, I'm anxious and bloated. I don't want to eat this. And that's what I find with the people I work with. They become addicted to feeling good and they want to keep going. And they become aware of it for themselves. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like, I've gone to all these doctors, they can be like, and all along it was like this, bread or something. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, you can go to my website and then I also do classes, Ayurveda, astrology, and I'll be doing an herbal class at Northampton Community College in the spring. So anybody can sign up to that. They're non-credit courses. So that's also available. And you could sign up to my mailing list on there. And then stay tuned for when my book comes out. So hopefully by the end of this year.
Excited for
Perfect.
that.
Thank you, Leah.
Thank
Thank
you.